Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which focuses on workforce implications as they relate to electrification in the transit industry. Before we begin our formal program, we would like to take an opportunity to recognize the significance of what happened on this fateful day 18 years ago and the lasting impact it will forever have on all of us, our nation, and the world. I am Pam Boswell, Vice President of Workforce Development and Educational Services at the American Public Transportation Association. I am pleased to moderate today's webinar. We are delighted to welcome APTA members and guests from over 200 sites across North America to today's session. We bring together an exciting and informative group of panel members in today's webinar. Our topic speaks to the changing landscape of our industry, where we've been, and where we are heading. Today, we will look at how we can better understand and define the role electrification has on the transit workforce. We will dive into the role academia, agencies, and manufacturers have in preparing the current and future-ready workforce on the technological innovations changing the transportation landscape. Our panel members plan to discuss areas such as academic training programs and mitigating academic challenges, how agencies are training, recruiting, and upskilling their workforce, collaboration between manufacturers and the industry, as well as intense hands-on training programs manufacturers are employing to meet workforce needs. Each of our speakers will offer about 10 minutes for remarks. After each speaker, we will ask a question or two. After our last speaker, we will continue our conversation with the panelists and open the door for your questions submitted to the question box. There is a lot to learn from today's speakers. Get ready to take good notes and post your questions to the question box found on the screen. We will read and address your questions aloud during the Q&A segment of the session. As part of today's program, we welcome the following panel of industry leaders. Professor Jess Guerra, Chair, Education and Career Awareness Subcommittee, APTA, and Director, Transportation Workforce Institute, Los Angeles Trade Technical College, Los Angeles, California. Ferdinand Risco, Chair, Workforce Development Committee, APTA, and Executive Director, the Transit Authority of River City, also known as TARC, Louisville, Kentucky. Brian Funk, Chief Deputy of Bus Operations, Metro Transit, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Stephanie Lobenstein, Director, Sales and Business Development, New Flyer, St. Cloud, Minnesota. And Donna DiMartino, Chief Executive Officer, San Joaquin Regional Transit District, Stockton, California. And now, let's welcome our first panel member, Professor Jess Guerra of the Los Angeles Trade Technical College. Jess, please begin your presentation.
Thank you, Pam. Good afternoon, everyone. Next slide. I am going to talk a little bit about the role of community colleges in particular when it comes to the electrification of the transit industry. I'll discuss a bit of what we have done here at LA Trade Technical College from the early stages of our programs to what we're doing today and to where our programs are headed. Next slide, please. So the early adoption at LATTC really began in about 2008 with some pilot courses in order to really learn from and be able to get from industry what we needed to teach when it comes to electric vehicles, and at that time, hybrids were the first buses that we were seeing on the road. Um, at that point, the project was mostly automotive focused. There was very little transit bus application to them. We knew that this was going to be an area where not only we were going to see an increase in the hybrid vehicles, but really what we were really waiting for was the electric buses. So in 2009, we launched a certificate program that's approved at the Chancellor's office. So it's a transcribable, full-blown certificate program in hybrid and plug-in electric vehicles. At that time as well, through a consortia in Southern California, which is the Southern California Regional Transit Training Consortium. It's a consortium of local transit agencies and community colleges. We also began some of the development in electric safety training to prepare us for the arrival of these technologies. Next slide, please. That brings us to where we are today. As a community college, we really have two areas of focus when it comes to supporting the transit industry on the bus electrification. One of them is with new entrants. How do we train, the next generation of technicians so that when they leave our campus, they will be ready to enter the industry and the learning curve will be as minimal as possible. So in regards to new entrants, we did establish an electric vehicle training program with a focus on transit coach powertrain with some of the technologies that are being used out there today, exposing them to different types of powertrain and different makes and models of the transit buses, the electric transit buses. The program was really put together to cater to the needs of some of the students that were going through our truck and transit program primarily. This is a feeder to some of our local transit agencies here like LA Metro, Santa Monica Big Blue Bus, and all of the municipalities here in the LA region, as well as our automotive students that also enter this employment field to help support electric vehicles on the non-revenue side of the house at these transit agencies. Given that those students were already coming with a certain, foundational background in terms of having the core competencies for the heavy equipment and also for automotive, we designed a program that can be completed typically in a year, but it can be completed in less than that if the students decide to take multiple classes. That's really the strategy right now to help and channel this new workforce into the transit industry. The other side of the house, and where community colleges can play a big role, is in the incumbent worker training and the upskilling of current technicians that are now having to transition after perhaps working for years on diesel-powered buses and having gone through, in certain transit agencies, through multiple technologies where they went through working on diesel to certain alternative fuels such as ethanol, methanol, compressed natural gas, and now again making another transition into electric bus work. So for incumbent workers, we do provide a series of training workshops that are set up in different levels from familiarization and vehicle safety to introduction and electric bus maintenance to advanced troubleshooting techniques. Those are packaged much differently than our training for our new entrants. They're packaged in 2 to, no more than really it's 2-day classes. At times we may have a 3-day workshop for something very specific, in particular for the advanced level session. And these courses are courses that we're able to bring on to the transits, realizing that it's very difficult to, get the technicians off of the floor and to send them over to our work site. or to our college, we actually send our instructors out to the transit agencies to complete the training there. The courses are delivered during multiple shifts, so we do work with the transit agencies to try to help and address the needs that are happening, whether it's in first shift, second shift. We've even done training during third shift to allow for the largest amount of technicians to show, and oftentimes being very flexible in the way that we schedule. And this type of training that we have been doing in partnership with the transits, at times we do it at an individual basis through the college, individually with a particular transit, or sometimes to groups of transit agencies through the SCRTTC. Next slide, please. One of the areas that I definitely wanted to touch on, that's what we can do to kind of help and bring the training. I think the real crux of things is in the challenges and how to mitigate these. So as a community college, one of the biggest challenges that we always face is budgetary constraints. Oftentimes the training equipment is expensive. Sometimes even if you are able to secure special funding, the equipment may not be sold outright to a community college. We've actually faced that situation. There's also a challenge with the evolution of technology. As technologies are improved, as the systems change, the industry is changing so rapidly that it makes it challenging for some of the colleges to be able to keep up. And then, of course, with the changes in technology, you also have the challenge of ensuring that faculty, the instructors that are teaching these courses, they're up to date with the latest technologies and emerging trends. And these are challenges that just about every college and even university will face, particularly running around training and budgetary constraints. The strategies and how we've been able to mitigate this, we really believe that partnerships are the key. Establishing partnerships between the community colleges, the local transit agencies that are in their area, to be able to partner to leverage some of the resources. Oftentimes these partnerships can be mutually beneficial in the sense of many of the transit agencies may not have the training facilities where these can be potentially shared. The college grounds can be used for training, and also to mitigate the training equipment component. Sometimes, we can use transit buses from some of our partner agencies to perform training on those. And then also, typically, once these partnerships are in place and, the transit agency and the college are working together, the college really remains involved, knowing that we have to not only prepare and help to train their incumbent workforce, but also to help get the new entrants ready. Oftentimes, we will send our instructors to some of the manufacturer-specific trainings, especially when there is a new bus or a new equipment purchase that is provided to them. Typically, there's training that's bundled up with that. And this really helps us to support not only, again, the incumbent workforce, but to be able to adjust our curriculum at the college level so that we're able to stay up with the latest trends. And then, of course, partnering with the equipment manufacturers, with the bus manufacturers that are out there, with being able to form those partnerships, that also has been proven to be a very successful strategy for us that has really helped us to mitigate the challenges that we face due to budget constraints. Next slide, please. In terms of the future of electric bus training at LITTC, as now there is a large amount of electric buses that are out there, and some of them using different powertrains are just a little bit different. We are looking into the development of a certificate program that's very specific to transit, one that actually includes a number of stackable certificates that are built into the electric bus training. The integration of intelligent transportation systems curriculum into the program we feel is very important, in particular now as these buses are much more complex and they're talking to each other, they're communicating with the Internet of Things and being able to really become much more technical. And then, of course, continuing our partnership with the transit agencies and with the OEMs so that we can, in turn, be able to better serve the industry. And that concludes my overview of the college's participation in this.
Jess, thank you for your clear explanation of how academia is preparing the current and future workforce. I'd like to follow up with a question. How do you ensure that your programs remain relevant to transit agency needs?
There are a couple of ways that we ensure that. First of all, one of the things that we have done is we've ensured that representatives from the transit agencies in our region are part of our advisory committee. As a California community college system, and in particular in career technical education, we're required to have advisory committees for the various programs. So we receive direct input from them on the direction that our programs should go. The other area that's been a big need is that through these partnerships, we've also been able to develop internships. And while our interns go out and complete their internships at the various transits, the transits in turn provide us with feedback. They let us know where are the areas that our students are really strong, where are areas that perhaps the college can take a look at, either through curriculum enhancements, additional training, etc., or additional preparation that we could provide them with as related to new technologies.
Thanks again, Jess. We now welcome our next speaker, Mr. Ferdinand Risco. You may begin your presentation.
Pam, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ferdinand Risco, and I am the Executive Director of the Transit Authority of River City in Louisville, Kentucky. And I am going to be discussing the impacts on an agency and how we are attempting to mitigate that to ensure that our workforce is prepared and ready to handle our fleet. So let me just tell you a bit about the Transit Authority of River City before we get into a bit of discussion. TARC is the largest transit provider in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We carry more than 40% of the Commonwealth's public transit riders. With 900,000 hours, we cover just about 12.5 million miles, and we have an average ridership of just about 12 million a year for the last few years. And of the 45,000 folks that we pick up every day, 63% of them are going to work and another 20% are going to school. So we are very clear that public transit and public transportation is really about workforce development and economic development. And being a part of the Ohio River Valley, air quality is incredibly important to our community. And so we want to make sure that as we are deploying our fleet, that we are doing that responsibly. TARC has a fleet of 227 buses, 33 of which are hybrid, and 15 are all electric. And that represents one of the largest fleets of all electric buses outside of the state of California. And so we are very proud of that. That fleet for us runs our downtown circulator named the Lou Lift. And those of you who came to visit us during the APTA Mobility Conference, we hope you had an opportunity to take advantage of that service. But we're really excited about where we're going with electrification and how we are making sure that our workforce is prepared to do all the things that they do to keep us moving because, again, we move the city. So we take that in a couple of different ways. We really start with recruitment. And because we are occupying, have a service area of 5 counties in 2 states, TARC represents southern Indiana in terms of service, as well as 3 counties in Kentucky. We are very cognizant to work with partners like Professor Guerrero with the technical college. So in our case, we have a partnership with Jefferson County Technical College in Kentucky, and we also partner with Ivy Tech in Southern Indiana. And so we start with recruitment of students out of those institutions long before we talk about how to train and skill them. And so the first part of workforce development is to be able to actually offer great paying opportunities with great benefits. But we also take a look at what it is that those institutions are doing in terms of curricula. And so we want to make sure that both the pedagogy and the rigor is there, and so that we know and understand that we're getting the best and the brightest as they come out of those academic institutions. And so we talk about the skills that are needed. We talk about what is actually in the industry when we move from hybrids to all electric. And when you have a fleet like ours that represents everything from 1999 model all diesel all the way through 2016 all electric buses, the skill set of the workforce is incredibly important. And so with the recruitment, we do that, and then we also talk about the curriculum with them. And then when it comes to truly training, we do it in a couple of different ways. For our transportation department and our operators, of which we have just over 500, it's really about the classroom, and we grab them as new hires, and we make sure that they know the difference between driving an electric bus and driving a diesel bus, because as we know in the industry, they are very different. And in order to truly get the cost savings and benefits of the all-electric bus, you need to drive that appropriately. And so we start with a PowerPoint presentation and some other classroom work. We finish that up with a great assessment to make sure that our employees are retaining the knowledge that they're getting in the classroom setting. But it is really about docking procedures and charging and the regenerative braking for the operators. And then day two of that portion of their training is actually out on the road. We have both 35 and 42-foot buses, so they are slightly different in their handling, and we want to make sure that they know how to properly dock them and charge them and handle the vehicles. And so that is what we do for new hires. For new bidders coming into the route who may have been driving a diesel bus and are now taking on a route that is electrified, we do subbing, and we take them out with an experienced trainer so that they get that same benefit of instruction, but it is one-on-one with them because they have more experience. In terms of our maintenance department, we really go a bit in depth with them. Obviously, they have much more hands-on and direct experience or will need it. And so since we were one of Proterra's first customers, we partner with them very significantly, particularly during the warranty period. And so for those first couple of years, they walked with us hand in hand and provided us a significant amount of training material. We did everything from lunch and learns all the way to trips to the manufacturer. And so we wanted our maintenance personnel to really be comfortable with this new piece of technology, and we wanted to make sure that they knew in and out what that piece of equipment was capable of, and not just be fearful of it. We know that change is difficult at times, and particularly if you've been working on all diesel buses for 20 or 25 years or so at that point, we know that that could be a bit daunting. But we were very excited that our workforce jumped right in, and we're very excited about the training. Of course, you have a few that are hesitant, but we're very pleased at the outcome of that training. And now that we are several years in, we are actually revamping because we know that the fleet is going to continue to be more electric. We're actually excited to have been recently awarded a congestion mitigation and air quality grant for just over $2.7 million that's going to allow us to increase our electric fleet. So we know that the size of the electric fleet will continue to increase. But what we are going to do starting in 2020, in terms of training, we are going to establish an apprenticeship program, again, in partnership with our technical colleges. We've already established a curriculum. We've used some of the great work that APTA has done around career ladders and pathways and skills and competencies, so there wasn't any need for us to reinvent the wheel. And we took that to our partners in academia and said, this is what we need. And they were very candid about providing us with all of it. And we were very surprised at that, but thankful nonetheless. And so the overall model will be the year that you enter the workforce, you will stay with that model year bus. And as we are prepared to retire that model year bus, we will ask you if you want to retool. And if you want to retool as an employee, then we put you into our apprenticeship program. And so that will be a year-long program around those skills and competencies going towards the future. And we know at this particular point, the fleet is going to continue to electrify. So we'll take that diesel mechanic, add those additional skills around electrification and the all-electric products, and continue to advance them. And so that way, all of our employees don't feel like they are just going to be thrown out or retired with the bus. And so that is our plan for 2020. We're very excited about that. We've got the structure in place. As we redesign our training department, that is going to be our future. And so let me just tell you a few things about some of the lessons learned and how we feel that big piece around infrastructure. We have 2 charging locations, and that was one of the biggest lessons learned for us. And how do you train the workforce around the chargers? We talked about the bus, and for whatever reason, there wasn't a lot of attention paid to the chargers. And so that would be one of our lessons learned, to make sure that you are paying attention to the entire ecosystem, and so that you can do that. I mentioned the CMAQ grant, and so we will be looking at new requirements. One of the things that we want to do is to be able to bring in the extended range bus, and so that we don't have to do daily charging, but that we can do overnight charging. And so what do we need to do in terms of our maintenance processes and procedures to allow for overnight charging instead of on the street charging? And so we will take a look at our requirements and making sure that we are looking at them in their totality. Adopting new technologies, we talked about the new extended range bus, but we all know that the fleets will continue to change, and we will continue to review each year that we attempt to buy a bus. What type of bus do we need, and how much do we need? And then finally, partnerships are critical. We are mobility solutions providers. We move people, we move the city, and we are not necessarily the instructors or workforce development gurus. And so we need to find those who are very capable of doing that and let the subject matter experts teach us. And with that, I will take your questions if you have any, Pam.
Thank you. Some excellent stories and insights from the agency perspective, which is very important. Burton, I have a question for you. Have you hired any students that you've worked with from the tech schools?
Absolutely. We are very excited to have provided opportunities to hire students out of the tech schools. They are very enthusiastic. They are coming to So yes, we have. We are very excited to have hired students right out of the tech school. They are very enthusiastic. They're coming with a breath of fresh air and lots of great knowledge about this new technology. We are excited that one of our tech school graduates actually represented us during the APTA rodeo and placed very well. So we're excited about that. But yes.
That's great. I do have a follow-up question.
Sure.
How have those new tech school hires meshed with the maintenance staff?
So that was a concern of ours, and but one of the things that we are doing at TARC is we've got a very significant program around knowledge transfer, and so we are mentoring and partnering folks all over the agency. We have some very long tenured employees at TARC, and then you have a bunch of rookies like me who barely know where the bathroom is. But what we do is we make sure that we partner some of our long tenured employees with some of the recent graduates, and it is a win-win. Each learns from each other, and you start to see these budding relationships and friendships grow on the shop floor, and it's just exciting. It's a new buzz at TARC, and we think that some of that mentoring is a part of it, and we're really excited about that.
Well, thanks again. Our next speakers are Brian Funk from Metro Transit and Stephanie Labinstein from New Flyer. Brian, Stephanie, please begin your presentations.
Thank you, Pam. This is Brian Funk. I'm the Deputy Chief Operating Officer for the bus system at Metro Transit in Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you go to the next slide, I think we'll see what most transit agencies are aiming for when they think about an electric bus, and that's cutting a ribbon with dignitaries. Here we have our governor, we have executives from New Flyer, state representatives and mayors, and this is fantastic. This is a big day to celebrate, and this is something everyone looks forward to. This picture was taken on June 8th of this year, just over 90 days ago, as we celebrated entering into service with our first all-electric bus. And next slide. But one of the things you need to plan for is that the bus is going to need maintenance, and I think we've heard that convincingly from our other panelists today, and that's something that at Metro Transit we want to take seriously, because as much as everybody needs to continue to celebrate our successes to get to opening day, we still need to take care of these assets and maintain them safely and keep them on the road. So we're asking ourselves the question, before we came to opening day, before that ribbon was cut, as well as now, are we ready? Are we going to be able to take care of these vehicles as we transition from a time when everything's new and exciting and we're in warranty to it becomes business as usual, and the expectation is that we're doing a good job in minimizing road calls and maximizing vehicle uptime. Next slide. A little bit more about Metro Transit here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. We're a pretty large transit agency with more than 3,200 employees, including more than 1,500 bus operators, a light rail and commuter rail system, our own police department, as well as you can see on this slide, more than 700 mechanics, cleaners, and helpers across both the bus and rail divisions. Next slide. And we provide service across a large area. The Twin Cities is one of the larger metropolitan areas in the United States. We provide the bulk of the service in the Twin Cities. And so you can see that over 80 million rides a year are used on our services, with the lion's share being done by the bus network. However, our light rail system continues to grow. So our fleet is comprised of a little over 900 buses today, including the 60-foot electric buses from New Flyer that we just started to begin service, like I mentioned, back in June. Next slide. And so what Metro Transit is doing is we're trying to make use of programs that we have in place that both the teams here and our mechanic technicians and the community, our partners, are familiar with. And so here's spend just a minute on this slide with a brief description of what we call our Metro Transit Technician Program. And so as much time as we spend, and I'll hit on this in just a second, sort of doing the up training and job skill training for our existing staff, we're also looking at, who are we bringing in and who are we going to build into the mechanic technicians of the future. And so this is a program that we started several years ago, and it goes over the course of 4 phases throughout a 2-year duration. It's actually about 2.5-year duration. So you can see in phase 1 is where we're doing the recruiting. We call it outreach and assessment. So we're reaching out into the community, partnering with job centers, partnering with employment communities and little nooks of people who are either underemployed or haven't received the formal skill training that would allow them to be a technician with Metro Transit. And so over the course of 3 months, the bottom number there, 400, is about the level of interest we have at that phase. There's a lot of work done there to assess people's ability and aptitudes. That brings us to phase 2, which is where we spend about 6 months doing part-time classes through community partners to get people ready for the rigors of its long program. Over the course of 2 years, not only are these candidates attending school, but they're also working as an intern for Metro Transit alongside our labor force. And so we want to make sure that people understand what that's going to be like to have some very long days and be able to keep up with both the balance of schoolwork as well as what it's like to work in our environment and start to learn a little bit about our culture and expectations. Phase 3 is sort of an initial on-the-job experience where 20 participants advance into that program. And finally, phase 4 is what I mentioned with the degree program and internship. We've partnered with Technical College here for both bus as well as light rail on a diesel mechanic position that's focused on transit buses, as well as an electromechanic technician program for light rail. And so what we're doing now is we're really looking to blend those programs and say we have a need in multiple areas, and for us, delivering service is the most important. Regardless of whether the vehicle is rolling on rubber or steel tires, we need to make sure that we have the right team who's able to do that. And so what our next steps are going to be, and we can go to the next slide, are going to be to begin learning immediately. As Ferdinand mentioned, we don't want to let the warranty period go while we're working side by side with New Flyer and not be learning anything. So New Flyer has been a great partner to help us understand what are the field service technicians doing and how do we gain access to begin learning for ourselves. It's easy to send everything out for warranty and have our staff focused on the other 900 buses that also need attention. But we're trying our best to make sure that we have our project team allocated to be able to make those site visits back to the factory in St. Cloud, which fortunately for us is only a short hour-long drive from our main facility. As I mentioned, we're partnering with New Flyer, so we sent multiple teams to their Vehicle Innovation Center, which I know Stephanie will hit on shortly here, and we're going to look to modify that program content. One of the ideas that we're considering, because we have a need for technicians in both skill areas, is to be able to combine perhaps that first year to say, what are the basics that, whether you choose a path working on buses, non-revenue vehicles, or trains, what's a base curriculum that all of those folks need? And then year 2 is spent more in an elective career pathway program. So that's something that we're working on developing right now. And finally, we want to find a role for everyone. Like many areas, the unemployment rate is extremely low here in the Twin Cities. The demand is high. We have an environment where we're a 24/7 operation, but we have a lot of great things to offer as well. So investing in our employees, making sure that we're prepared to maintain these assets, deliver them for our customers, and fulfill that promise of more electrification and advancing the fleet. The technology being on the leading edge is really important to us. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie to share some information about New Flyer.
Hi, thank you, Brian. And that opening day really was fantastic. We're absolutely honored to partner with Minneapolis Metro. And thank you to APTA for inviting me to participate in this important dialogue. Today, I'm going to talk about how workforce development, training, and advancement is needed to support the evolution to zero-emission buses. I'm also going to discuss the importance of intensive hands-on electric bus training programs that we offer through the Vehicle Innovation Center that Brian mentioned. These are programs we developed and launched alongside our leading industry partners that are focused on meeting this exact workforce need. Next slide, please. So by 2030, the world is projected to have 41 megacities with over 10 million inhabitants. This poses questions such as, how do we build these cities? How will we move people? These cities are going to be green and sustainable, and while EPA standards are driving fossil fuels to be cleaner, the drive to sustainable transportation, combined with individual lifestyle choices, does require a change in how we move people. Some of the trends we've noticed that there is a greater need for connected, efficient, and multimodal public transportation in growing cities, experiencing traffic congestion, long commutes, and less affinity to car ownership. Elected officials in C40 cities have committed to fossil-free streets by 2030 and only zero-emission vehicles purchased after 2025. And we've also seen that there's been a gradual evolution in transit agency value propositions from being a transit provider to a smart mobility integrator. So as we see mobility change to embrace sustainable strategies, our workforce has to adapt as well. At New Flyer, we've had to consider how we will support this transformation, and today I'm going to touch on two strategies we deployed. The first is we opened the Vehicle Innovation Center, and that is to educate the industry, cultivate knowledge in our own organization, and train the workforce that will support that transition to electrification. The second is that we're actively involved in our industry to learn about these macro trends and ensure we're designing the right solutions to support the workforce. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the Vehicle Innovation Center. We established the Vehicle Innovation Center to educate the industry as well as our team members. The emergence of electric technology does not just affect the skill set of a mechanic, it also affects city and urban planners. There's integration of utilities to be considered, and there's also complex ideas like route modeling. It touches every position in a transit agency and beyond. Therefore, we have a responsibility to train on these emerging technologies so that riders and the public can reap the benefits of electrification without compromising on safety, service, and reliability. So we've developed numerous programs for various stakeholders, and today I'm going to review with you a typical two-day session for transit agency employees. Next slide. So this slide, as you can see, is just a well-planned out agenda. We like to focus on all aspects of technology, whether it be accessibility on the buses, route planning, energy consumption, regenerative braking. It's a combination of hands-on and classroom training, and it's designed to provide a very strong knowledge base. One of the other benefits at the VIC and with this program is that we do battery buildups at our manufacturing plant there, and we also build products there. So when we offer these courses, we are able to provide a really hands-on experience for the attendees. And we put both our agency partners through these programs as well as our individual staff so that they can learn exactly what we're putting out and building for the industry. Next slide, please. The course content is designed to address common questions and concerns around electric buses. It's really important that the stakeholders we have understand everything from the basics on how a battery string is set up and works to the complexity of route modeling. So here I would highlight two courses. The first is the Introduction to Lithium-Ion Battery Technology. As diesel engines moved to diesel-electric hybrids, there was a learning curve. So now as we remove the engine and go to batteries, the workforce needs to understand the basics of how a bus moves and how battery technology actually works. This course actually covers everything from Energy Storage 101 to safety considerations when working on battery technology. The other course that we have that is notable is Designing and Planning an Electric Bus System. And what's really interesting about this course as an example is it's a team exercise. And it's a module where you're given parameters. And you actually have to go design and plan an electric bus system. You have to understand the intricacies of route planning, charging strategies, and see if you can actually build a sustainable system that provides riders with efficiency and reliability. So we've tried to make sure that a course actually encompasses everything to do with sustainable technology. So that's a little bit about the VIC and the course. Now, the next slide will just show some of the content and activities at the VIC, if you wouldn't mind moving forward. Thank you. We try to encompass various learning platforms and styles by using classrooms with traditional learning materials such as PowerPoint. We also try and use electronics and technology so that the learning is relevant and hands-on. So in an electric bus scenario, we have different apps or internet interfaces where you could actually see how a bus is performing. We use those as part of the training so that there's a relevancy factor. And then we also have items such as a virtual reality bus plug-in charging experience. We have a bus simulator for drivers, And we have a shop there that's complete with overhead walkways and buses. So we are combining all different types of learning styles. Moving on to the next slide. This slide really highlights for you how we go about developing the course material that goes into the VIC. For several years, we've been actively advocating for workforce development and diversity initiatives in transit. And we currently have representation on or with the groups that are listed on this slide. These have been critical to identifying our workforce needs with regards to the electrification of bus fleets, as well as supporting and promoting our diversity initiatives in the workplace. So this sums up the approach we're taking for both the industry and our internal workforce, and I really want to thank you for allowing us to share in this presentation today.
Thank you both. It's clear that you have a strong partnership, excellent points and insights, always a lot to learn. I have a couple questions to follow up for each of you. I'll start with you, Brian. What are your plans for additional electric buses?
Yeah, thanks, Pam. So what Metro Transit is doing is we're looking ahead and we're forecasting, of course, what are we able to do within our capital budget program. And so while we're balancing a number of new initiatives, we do want to continue to advance. So right now, we're currently in the process of setting up a procurement for 40-foot buses because, as I mentioned, these buses are designed on one of our bus rapid transit lines. And so especially in our northern climate, one of the things that we want to better understand is how are they going to perform and what are the investments that we need to make, whether it's battery size on board the bus or for en-route charging, and how long do we carry that out and those sorts of things. So we're really excited about this pilot, learning more and acquiring more buses so that we can continue to advance and make smart decisions.
That's great. Just following up, given your long-term plans, has your local union been involved with workforce activities?
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and they have been involved. They've really been working with us side by side from many years ago with traditional internship programs through our local two-year colleges up through the more recent mechanic technician training program that I outlined, all the way to establishing sort of our project team who worked on the launch of these first electric buses. The union has been a strong advocate, been very eager to have staff participate, be flexible when there's things about work hours and pay stipends and all those sorts of things that we try to look for the opportunities where we can work together and celebrate these successes because it's in our best interest collectively to make these things work well.
Thank you, Brian. Stephanie, I have a question for you. What is an initiative that New Flyer is proud of when it comes to workforce development?
Well, we're really proud of our involvement in all of the industry groups and initiatives that are advancing workforce development and diversity initiatives. So as an example, we have a partnership with the organization TDC, the Transportation Diversity Council, and we feel like when we partner with those types of organizations, it furthers our inclusive and diverse culture and opens more areas for New Flyer to have a positive community-based influence.
Thanks again, Stephanie. Our final speaker is Donna DiMartino. Donna, we'd love to gain your insights into this important issue. Please begin your presentation.
Thank you, Pam. I am delighted to be here and continuing our discussion on the workforce implications of bus electrification in our industry, a very important topic. And you've probably noted that there have been many recurring themes presented by the panelists today. Next slide, please. I'd like to get started. Next slide, please. I'd like to get started by telling you a little about San Joaquin RTD and our journey into bus electrification. First of all, where is San Joaquin RTD? We are in the Central Valley of California. We are San Joaquin County's regional transportation provider. We serve a very large geographic area, over 1,400 square miles, the area that you see highlighted in white on the map. You can see the enormity of the area we serve in comparison to our neighbors, pardon me, in both the Bay Area and Sacramento. We serve 7 cities and some of the richest agricultural land in the world. Because we have such a large and diverse community, we provide many types of service. Commuter service to Sacramento and the Bay Area, 5 bus rapid transit corridors within the city of Stockton, traditional fixed routes and paratransit services, as well as county-wide deviated fixed routes, we call them our hoppers, and our own mobility on demand, which we call Van Go. Next slide, please. San Joaquin RTD operates in an area with very poor air quality. We have always been committed to doing our part to improve our environment. We've made it a point to invest in new technologies, not just as a matter of innovation, but as a matter of mobility, environmental justice, and public health. We transitioned our entire fixed route fleet from diesel to hybrid diesel electric, and in 2013, through a California Energy Commission grant and a partnership with Proterra, RTD introduced Northern California's first 2 100% battery electric buses into service. As a public transit provider, we value the opportunity to transport as many passengers as possible with as few emissions as possible so that the impacts of pollution and emissions can be mitigated or altogether eliminated. You can see from the chart on this slide that we have expanded our electric bus fleet. We added 10 more buses in 2016 and 5 more in 2018. The buses are evolving as shown on the graph, with larger onboard battery storage and longer range. We operate 2 types of charging systems, a set of fast overhead chargers that charge in 10 minutes and provide for a 30-mile range, along with our latest overnight depot chargers, which take about 6 hours to charge a bus, but allow for a 130-mile range. Next slide, please. So you've already heard about the need for technician training and operator training, but one thing I'd like to point out is that there's really a need for manager training as well. Being the 4th in the nation to introduce these new battery electric buses was exciting, but it was also challenging. We definitely learned that we had to expand our skills and our knowledge. So the title of this slide is Workforce Development, What Do We Need? With many of my other early adopter colleagues, we have had to learn things we never expected to have to learn as transit CEOs. Things like, how does this electric bus even operate? How does electricity work? We knew about peak and off-peak utility rates, but what are demand charges? What is a kilowatt, a megawatt? How far can these buses operate on a charge? And the big question, how much will this cost? So for maintenance, the next bullet I want to cover, we needed to learn about working on battery electric buses, about new safety procedures and protocols, and another big question, what? We have to think about when we fuel? That is something we never had to consider before, but especially with the volatile utility rates, it's certainly something we do need to consider now. For operators, we've had to provide basic operations training on how to drive the buses. They are different. And also, we had to show them that their performance has a big impact on the range of the bus. So teaching and maybe even incentivizing them to perform well has been part of the training. For facilities, of course, we've had to prepare our workforce to plan and maintain charging infrastructure and to measure and to manage the new cost. Next slide, please. My next slide is workforce development. What do we have? And I'm going to start out by saying know the resources. You've already heard about several resources today, and we have many resources. You don't need to go it alone when it comes to developing your workforce. I took a few photos on this slide just yesterday of a very small sampling of what I found online of resources that are available for workforce development. Of course, APTA's picture is there. And today's webinar demonstrates APTA's commitment to being a partner in workforce development. And APTA, of course, also offers conferences and committees to provide additional resources and support. The second organization I want to mention is the National Transit Institute. NTI, most of you are familiar with this program, and if you're not, please look it up because NTI offers a wealth of public transit training courses in many topics. NTI is currently conducting research and planning a variety of training courses related to bus electrification. The next organization I wanted to mention is a long acronym, SCRTTC. You heard a little bit about this organization from Jess earlier, and it stands for Southern California Regional Transit Training Consortium. It was a brilliant partnership between Southern California transit agencies and academic partners who have created some very relevant basic electrical safety and familiarization courses for maintenance technicians in transit agencies. One of the first things I want to let you know is that we plan to change the name from SCRTTC to just CRTTC. So rather than just being Southern California, we've already expanded into the entire California area. And as an organization, we plan to expand the number and types of courses we offer, as well as the teaching methods we use to deliver those courses. And I want to let you know, don't let the California in the name lead you to discount this as a resource for your training needs if you are outside of California. Jess mentioned it, and you've heard a little bit before about how we are working on distance learning and webinars, and how we really want to share the programs we've developed in California with the entire nation. I have a picture from the California Transit Association, and not just the California Transit Association, but other state associations as well are at work planning sessions and speakers to help their members prepare to expand bus electrification in the transit industry. So my next point is get involved. But you probably are the wrong audience for that, because you already know that because you're attending this webinar right now. The last point on this slide is make recommendations. This year, I am not only the chair of APTA's Mid-Sized Operators Committee, I am also the chair of the Southern California Regional Transit Training Consortium and the vice chair of NTI, both organizations committed to training the transit workforce and very eager to help with your workforce development needs. I'm asking you to reach out to me personally to let me know about your training needs and any recommendations that you might have for training for your workforce. So with that, please, next slide. I plan to close. Here's a picture of our first electric bus in front of the Golden Gate Bridge. It's a beautiful shot. The bus was really there. It had to be towed because we didn't have the range to get there. But on that note, I do want to close and hopefully be able to help answer some of your questions. Thank you.
Donna, thank you for sharing your very interesting perspective. I do have a question for you. What recommendations do you have for those just stepping into the electric bus arena?
Oh, so many, but considering this is on workforce development, I would say remember to lean on your manufacturers to provide not just technical support, but also intense operator and technician training. They know their vehicles best. We're all in this together. And I know that I plan to rely on the manufacturers as the Southern California Regional Transit Training Consortium advances its training program. So lean on the manufacturers.
Thank you, Donna. It is time to engage our panelists in a continued conversation and dialogue. I have a question to get the conversation started. We will soon be looking to our audience. If anyone in today's audience has a question for our panel members, you can submit your questions via the question box found on your screen. We will read your questions aloud and direct them to our panel members. We will do our best to answer all your questions. I'm throwing this question out to any of the panelists if you would like to respond. Do you think that the introduction of electric buses will make it harder to recruit, easier? What's your perspective?
I'll take that. This is Ferdinand. I think it is just another opportunity. I think it is incumbent upon the industry to market and promote the opportunities that we have, be it the traditional diesel mechanic or the electro technician or whatever is next in our workforce. We have a very significant opportunity to be able to provide very comfortable wages and great benefits to a new segment of employees that may not have considered transit previously. And I think a lot of what we need to do is around marketing and promoting. I don't think it'll be any harder or any easier. I think it is just more opportunities.
Thank you, Ferdinand.
Hi, Pam. This
Yes.
is Jess. I would just add also. I totally agree with Ferdinand. I think this presents a great opportunity, especially when we're looking at the multi-generational workforce, and as we're looking at how do we attract more, millennials, Gen Zs in particular. We already know that they have an affinity to sustainability, to environmental justice, and in the fact that this, I think that the influx of electric buses, really changes what the stereotype of a transit bus technician, at least using that as an example, would be. This is now a highly technical occupation that can really be something that motivate some of these younger generations to join the ranks of transit professionals.
Thank you, Jess. I have another question from the audience for you. Is your organization training for battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell electric buses? Jess?
Okay, sorry. I figured, yes. The answer to that is yes. Yes, we are doing training on all aspects of and all systems of a electric bus, including the battery systems. We did partner with the California Energy Commission to launch a series of credit courses that are now in the hydrogen fuel cell side of things. So that is actually a piece of training that we launched, I want to say about a year and a half ago. So we do provide training on both.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Brian, we have a question for you. How did you decide to start with 60-foot buses rather than 40-foot buses for the electric bus fleet?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it was an opportunity for us through an FTA no and low emission partnership grant that we had with New Flyer. And so the bus rapid transit system that this vehicle or these vehicles are operating on goes through a number of areas where locally, at least, we classify them as areas of concentrated poverty, which also have higher than 50% people of color. And that really was one of the key things that I think helped our standing when we applied for that grant. And so we wanted to be able to provide electrification to transit or transportation in an area where it was probably going to be one of the latest adopters for people to get electrification in personal vehicles. So that was one of the main drivers, is that grant gave us the push to be able to make this investment in that area.
Thank you. I have a question for you, Stephanie. What would you say is the most important aspect of workforce development when it comes to transit buses?
That's a good question. I think ensuring an environment of inclusiveness and having every voice at the table so that we can make decisions that best serve transit ridership across North America is very, very important. You cannot create industry-leading solutions and develop your workforce unless you know who they are and you're willing to actually consider them and collaborate with them in your workforce development initiatives.
We've received another great question. How well received have electric buses been from the operations and maintenance staff?
So I can tell you at TARC, initially there was some apprehension around the introduction of the electric buses. But since then, I think there has been a change in behavior and a change in attitude around electric buses. And I think it was really, we were some of the early adopters in the 2013, 2014 world. And so I think it was just very new to the industry. It was absolutely new to our community. And also, I think it was up against the replacement of our iconic trolley system, which had a significant sentimental value in the community. So all of those things together didn't fare well for the electric bus initially, but now that the trolleys have been retired and given their place in history, our all-electric fleet now is amazing and very well received.
Pam, this is Donna.
Okay. Yes, Donna.
One of the surprises that I had was that while everyone was excited to test the technology, as we started expanding our fleet, we started to have operator worries about the health hazards associated with being in the electric buses for prolonged periods of time. They were worried about being exposed to EMFs and fumes from the electric buses and plastic parts. So I would encourage everyone to be prepared to ease the operators' minds in advance about those problems or those anxieties. And we really worked with our operators to assure them that they were safe, just as safe as they were on any other bus.
Thank you, Donna. We do have more time for audience questions. We've exhausted the ones we've received so far. So I'm going to ask another question, and I want you all to think about your questions. How do you balance both traditional and new electric bus training for coach operators? Not all at once.
Yeah, this is Brian. I can jump in and just say, because we're probably the most recent agency of those on the call today who have started this, and we learned from others. We talked to peers in the industry to say, what do you think is the best practice? And so really what we established is an electric bus certification program, much like what's been described by both Ferdinand and Donna. And we incorporated that, so when operators selected the route, because these are route-based buses, they had both a classroom and behind-the-wheel experience so that they were able to understand the fundamentals of what the electric bus is, what the battery system does, how it propels the bus, a lot of the nuts and bolts, as well as what's going to be our strategy. And so when do you call the transit control center? What are some of the troubleshooting that's going to be expected for you? And really put their mind at ease in a classroom setting, and then brought them out into the vehicles and were able to operate the route and see, okay, here's where I park for the layover if I need to do my on-route charging. Here's how I operate normally, and sort of here's the big picture goal of what we're trying to accomplish. And I think that letting, at the operators in particular, getting them in early to say, hey, you're part of something special, and this is really cool, I think was really appreciated by that group.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you all for all the great questions that you're asking, and it just lends itself to more and more discussion. As we conclude today's webinar, please join me in thanking our distinguished panel members, Jess, Ferdinand, Brian, Stephanie, and Donna. To audience members, thank you everyone for being part of an excellent session. Clearly, this topic was a big hit and timely. Lots of lessons learned and shared. Today's slides, the audio recording, and additional resources will be posted to the APTA website on the webinar series page within the next few weeks. Thank you for joining us today. APTA's next Future View webinar will be on the topic Data Activism, Leveraging Advocates to Improve Public Transit. This webinar is scheduled for Wednesday, November 13th from 3 to 4:15 p.m. We hope to see you at future sessions. Thank you very much.